$2 is $2 and $2.99 85 in the warehouse. Well, I used to be a tobacco farmer myself. My dad raised tobacco, and then he and I worked a little bit together. And I always was fascinated by the auctioneer who used to sell my tobacco in Shelbyville, Kentucky. And I wanted to be an auctioneer so bad. Why the heck did he do that? So I went to, after I got, so I could, my dad looked after my tobacco and my crop, and I went to Fort Smith, Arkansas for 2 weeks to learn how to auctioneer, or get the fundamentals of it. And it takes about 3 or 4 years to really learn how, but they give you the fundamentals and you practice and practice and practice. And I just wanted to be one so bad. And I just kept going to it, and I got an opportunity to go to Georgia and sell tobacco. And a little small sale down there, and that's when I started. That was about 1970. I started out in Georgia, and I've sold in North Carolina, Kentucky, and Tennessee. Sold tobacco in Knoxville, Tennessee 4 years. My home is in Shelbyville, Kentucky, and I was fortunate enough to get to go back to Lexington and sell in to Shelbyville in Kentucky. In 1975, I sold tobacco in Salisbury, Rhodesia, which is now Harare, Zimbabwe. And that was a very good experience. I stayed 5 months over there selling, and rented an apartment, bought a car, and stayed there 5 months, and got to see a little bit of the country. It was quite an experience. Well, different regions, the tobacco auction itself in the United States doesn't differ. We do the same thing in Georgia, North Carolina, Kentucky, Tennessee. Basically the same thing. We're telling the buyers what the bid is when we're auctioneering. But now, and in the same way in Rhodesia or in Zimbabwe, the only difference overseas is that in that particular country, they sell in kilos, where we sell in pounds, and when you say $1.80 a pound, $1.80 a kilo, it depends, it goes for the same area, but they figure it by the kilo or by the pound, depending on what country you're in. Well, every auctioneer is different, and we all think we're the best in the world. I mean, that's sad to say, but we do, We want to be the best, and which is good. You got to have a desire. Some are slow, some are very rhythmic. Page Roberts, I think of him, when you think of a rhythmic auctioneer, he's just kind of, he's one and two, and he got a little dance as he goes along. And Billy Clark, he was a comedian out of Greenville, North Carolina. And he had a real bang, bang, bang with his chant. This way he goes down to and he could talk to you while he was auctioneering. He was quite a character. And he got to sell for the president when John F. Kennedy was president. They put on a demonstration in Greenville, and he was an auctioneer. And he's a comedian. He said he really put on quite a show. But all auctioneers are different. You got some with low voices, high voices, some real hyper, some laid back. It's just, in the chant, when I started, I listened to Page and his rhythm, Russell Zell, his authority, and a guy by the name of Herbert Baker from Georgia. And they was big, tall fellas, and they was, had a lot of authority. They did it in I'm in charge, because I was a little short dude, and it took me a long time to let them know I was in charge. But with the rhythm and the chant, and you put 2 or 3 together, and that's what I did. I tried to work on this, work on that. And you practice, and after a while, your abilities of what you're able to do will come out, and then this is your style, and that's the way it works. You have when you're selling 4 or 5 hours a day, you get tired, but if you, for an example, when I'm selling, there's a starter. I don't know. When your sales going on, you got a starter, a gentleman who praises a pile of tobacco and hollers out a price. And as the auctioneer, I pick up that figure that he said, and I start chanting. And I'm telling the buyers, or asking to start with, I'm showing them, okay, this is what this pile's worth. You don't ask for everything selling tobacco, you just tell them. So he said, $1.80. I said, $180, $80, $80, $90, $80, $79, $90, $85, $75, I'm buying, nobody's bidding. I'm going down till somebody bids. If somebody bids, say 74, 75, I'm buying 4, 5, 5, 7, 7, 6, 7, 7, 8, 9, 8, American. I mean, they're out here doing this number right here. And that's something else if nobody has. When the buyer's over there bidding, the fist is always on the 10, 60, 70, 80, 90. And that's a 1 or a 6, depending on where you are on the scale. If I'm chanting, let's say $1.70, that's a 1. 72, that's a 6, because I'm over the 1. So they do it like that. That could be a 2 or a 7, that's an 8 or a 3, a 4 or a 9. When I'm at 75 and they give you that right there, that's 79. And then of course again, this is or 80, whatever the price is you're crying. That's something that you gotta learn to pick up too. And then they're all over doing this number right here, you know. If I might be at 72 and he's doing this, well that's 66, you know. He wants to go down to 66. And you put all that in perspective and then let it go. So that's the way you do that. You have anywhere from 8 to 12 buyers in the United States. We're usually normally about 10 is a normal sale for the buyers. And they're walking on one side of the road. On the other side, you got the buying line and you got the selling line. On the selling line, you have the tobacco warehouseman who would start the pile of tobacco, the auctioneer, the man who'd hand the tickets, and the ticket marker. And then sometimes you'd have a man back behind that or right behind the auctioneer who supported the would bid on the tobacco for the warehouse, so trying to protect the price to keep the price up. So you got two buying lines. And in Rhodesia, they had 14 in line. They had a man in front of me, behind me, and 12 across the road. Now that's quite a pile up, you know. But you're doing this, and doing this all the time, you know. You got to keep them all covered. But after a while, it becomes automatically, you know, you get used to it, and you learn what to do. And it's, well, when you do it day after day, this is my 50th year of selling auctioneering. I sold it back in 36, and we'd still be selling if they hadn't made a big change, you know, so I would probably still be about close. I was hoping to be selling back in 50 years, but they didn't happen. So, but I'm still auctioneering, and we still have farm equipment auctions, things like that. Well, there's a whole lot I miss. You got the friendship with the people, and when you're traveling, you make friends in each state, you know, everywhere you go, and you look forward to each year to going back and visiting the old friends that you had last year, year before last. And the buyers and the auctioneers, they become close because they travel together and their family's home, and they get to go home once every 3 or 4 weekends or whatever. Some of them don't get to go home once a month, or maybe have to go out there and stay the entire time. Well, I enjoy selling tobacco probably more than anything because it's kind of unique for one thing. It's easy to do. Everybody can't do it. You know, it's something that's different. I enjoy all the techniques of selling tobacco, the friendship, and see, this is what I think I told you earlier. The auctioneer selling tobacco, and just about any sale for that matter, is the star of the show. You know, if I make a mistake, what am I going to do? You can't let it bother you. You got to keep on going. But most people don't know anyway. If I made a mistake, they don't know if I made a mistake. But you got to learn to laugh at yourself and keep on going. If you can laugh at yourself, other people will laugh with you. So that's one thing that you really got to do. Is just go on and don't worry about your mistakes. Special memories? Yeah, I've got one that I've carried with me from the beginning. And when I first started auctioneering, you know, I didn't get to do much in Shelbyville. I was a hometown boy. Go somewhere and get your experience, then come back and we'll talk to you. But I mean, that's normal for about anybody. Because if you're local and everybody knows you, well, you can't do that, you know. And that's a fact. That's the way it goes. But anyway, I got an opportunity to go to Moultrie, Georgia, and sell tobacco, a little small sale. And the tobacco buyers, Harvey Pittman, Brad Strickland, Brad was from Wendell and Harvey was from Wilson, got me my first job. And I hadn't sold over 3 or 4 rolls of tobacco in my whole life. And I've been going down there scared to death, not knowing anybody. There was, I think, 12 or 13 buyers in line, didn't know all the companies. excuse me, they had different companies down there than we have up here. And I started praying. I prayed all summer. And my uncle was going to go with me. He went with me down there. And I knew when I got the call and got the job, it was about, seeming like about May. And I prayed in May and June, and July the market starts. And here we go down there. It was in Moultrie, Georgia, at the Colquitt Hotel. And the buyer stayed there. And they'd come in the door and introduce themselves, and I forget the name, I just put the company on their face, Reynolds, American Export, Monk, Buchanan, whoever it was. And man, I said, Lord, please have me remember all these names. Please, Lord, please have me remember. Well, I prayed and I prayed. Sale day came on a Monday. We got down on a Saturday. Monday morning we went out to the warehouse. Kind of cloudy. It rained just a little bit, but just cloudy. So I went out in the middle floor and sat on the pile back and waiting for the buyers to come in. Reynolds Company, export. Because if you don't know their name when you're selling $89, $88, $98, who got it, And you know who? You got Reynolds, $89, $88 export. You got to be able to holler out the name in an instant like that. So I was trying to remember all their names. And I prayed. I said, no, I'm back there, Lord. And praise them. And it started getting dark. The graders had already started grading. They was grading in the back. Got over about 6 or 8 rows, getting about 10, 15 minutes for sales start, and the graders stopped. It's getting too dark to grade. I kept looking at the buyers, American, Taylor, and the sale was delayed for about an hour. Thank you, Lord. And I got them all. Pretty well, I got the sale. Never missed a hit, never missed a lick. So that was an experience. My very beginning. And I think the good Lord had something to do with that. But anyway, that was something I carried with me through the whole time. Well, at one time, selling and auctioneering tobacco was a prestige job. I mean, folks wore coat and ties, especially in the cold weather, in the Burley and Tennessee and in the cold country. And when we were selling it, it was a very prestigious job. And you come out, I wore a coat and tie on the floor. Hey, we was all dressed like we was going to church, really. And these big black cars would come in with the riding supervisors, and they'd get out in a big black coat and fancy coats and ties. Down here it was hotter, so we wore short sleeve shirts, but you wouldn't recognize people up there down here in the summer because they wore coats and caps all down. Down here we didn't have a hat on and a little short. You said, look at this, I've seen him before, So you wouldn't hardly recognize some of them. But I think everybody enjoyed their job. It was, like I say, it became very prestigious, and it was something that you look forward to. You was proud of, not knowing the harm of tobacco in those days. When they started talking about tobacco companies, how tobacco was hurting you and how harmful it was. I mean, that's crazy. That's how we got started in this country. That's where we are in this part of the country now because of tobacco. The first trading items that we had, trade issues, was with tobacco. And on the Capitol building in Washington, D.C., there's tobacco leaves on the podium and the post up there. And it was very important. Well, now it's completely opposite. But that still is a fact that if it hadn't been for tobacco, we would have had a hard struggle to be where we are today. That made us feel important. We out here, people coming, how does he do that? And it makes you feel good to people to watch it, to entertain. We become entertainers too, in along with that. Excuse me, but the most important one on that sale was the ticket mark, who got very little attention. They were the one that was recording what I was saying. And if they got to have it right. And they're back there going just, some of them can mark just as fast as I can say them. And it's amazing how they can do that. But that's one job that really got kind of pushed behind, or pushed back a little bit. Of course, the companies knew how important they were, but the general public, he got his right to take it. The guy making the noise is one everybody looks at. But the one that really deserves more credit is the ticket market, putting down what we're saying. Well, different individuals own the warehouses. and the warehouses and the auctioneers were in competition with the buyers. Each warehouse, and it developed over markets from Georgia on North Carolina, on all the markets, and would have more than one warehouse, and they would be in competition with each other trying to get the individual farmers tobacco. And so the one that would get the highest price would get sell the most tobacco. That was their goal and what they were striving for. And that competition continued on as long as ever since I've been in the business. And it always would, because the more tobacco they got, the more money they made. The more tobacco they sold, the more money they made and sell it to the companies. Each market had its own, well, like Wilson, for example, I think it was one time there was 20-some warehouses in Wilson, if I'm not mistaken. And when we closed down, I think it was about 4 or 5. And it just gradually went down. And that's that way. But Wilson was the largest market in North Carolina. Lexington, Kentucky was the largest market in Kentucky, Lexington. But now, we advertised at one time that Wilson was the largest market in the world, but it wasn't. Rhodesia, when it was Rhodesia, sold about 200 million pounds. We sold 100 million on the high side. So they sold twice as much as we did. But I mean, if you don't know, you don't know. But we found out, I think they changed it to the world's greatest market after so many years. And they had to do away with the world's largest. You get a job of being good. You get paid for being good. But some of us wasn't good to get the top money. And I tell you, really what makes an auctioneer, you don't have to sound pretty to be a good auctioneer. You got to know what you're doing. Sounding pretty along with it is great, and it's some auctioneers like that. But what makes an auctioneer real valuable is being able to have customers to come to the warehouse where he's selling. And then the warehouseman wants him, because along with him comes all these customers that they like. He likes, his buddies and his friends to sell tobacco with him. And that's very important, is becoming a good auctioneer. I know a lot of auctioneers, to me, they're not real good, but they got a big following, and they get paid well because they got folks coming in. And of course, the more tobacco the auctioneer brings in, the less it costs the warehouseman, because he's paying for himself. See, it don't cost him nothing. His auctioneer, he's got folks that pays his salary. So that's the way that works. Mm-hmm. My friend, and then they think, well, if I go over and sell with Greg, he knows the buyers, he can help me get a little better price. Mm-hmm. And this is kind of what they follow through to get the money, And the friendship is the number one thing. And then if you got a relationship with the buyers, they say, and the buyers will have a price range. So let's say from on a particular grade from $1.81 to $1.86. And just keep an average in there of $1.84. Well, this guy's got tobacco that'll make that grade, and the auctioneer says, hey, I know you got more money on that. He can get the top money, give him $1.86 instead of $1.81, see. So that's what we strive to do. We want to sell tobacco as high as we can, so that we can get the customers, and then our boss will be happy with us too, see. Because the more I get paid, the better prices I get, then somebody will want me, So it's a challenge through the whole thing. Human calculator. I came in when they was going out, but I did get to see a little bit of it. Guy Barnes and Spencer Edmondson in Rocky Mountain were mental calculators, I guess what you would call them. And they could walk down through there and write these figures in and put a price down there and never stop. I mean, they do like that. And how in the world they do it, I don't know. But they train, I guess just like auctioneers, ticket markers, they were trained to do that. And but I got to see them do it, but I don't know if there's any we got down. I don't know any. Everybody's got a calculator now. We don't use our head anymore. We got a telephone and a calculator, and it's messing up brains now. It's called ham, liquor, money. Anything they could do to get the companies, the buyers, to give them a little extra money. Yeah, they did all kind of tricks. And I mean, I know I've seen that, but other than that, I don't know. But they give them money, give them certificates, all kind of things to get the buyer to. And the auctioneer too. They try to work on the auctioneer some so he would really try to get You know, you work on the auctioneer, work on the buyers, and some of them spend more money than they're gonna make, trying to get a good price. Another thing, if you got the top price, it was a bragging rights in the community. Well, I sold my tobacco, I brought so-and-so, you know, I got, here's a ticket to brought. So, and that was the thing that a lot of the farmers like to do, sit down at the old country store and brag on how much their tobacco brought more than the other man. So, yeah, there's various things that went on like that. Well, fortunately, I guess you could say I'm still living. I've been through a lot of changes in tobacco. And in the Burley, I was raised up. My dad stripping it by hand, putting it in little hands, putting it on a stick, packing it down, taking it off, picking it out of the stack, put it on the truck, haul it to the warehouse, take it off the truck, take it off the stick, put it on a basket, and then sell it. That was the process in Burley. And after they bought the buyer, or the company bought the basket, they'd shoot it across the next door in Shelbyville to the reed dryer, and they put it back on the stick and run it through a reed dryer, take it back off the stick, and then put it in these hogsheads to keep it up for several years, whatever it needed to do. But the sheets went down here and started, when I come in this area, we had some hand tied down here too. We used to sell some, what they call, what did they use it for? Leaf tobacco, for wrappers. They'd sell the hand tied, real fancy tobacco that didn't have any holes in it. And some of the farmers would do that and tie it, they get extra dollars, maybe $1.50, $2 a pound, because it was wrapping tobacco, wrappers they call it. And we'd have a special sale 2 or 3 times a year with hand tied tobacco in the flukery. And then it went to the sheets. But I guess the baskets probably, well, that's what they put their hand tied on, you know, just like it did in Kentucky, on baskets like this right here. And then it went to the sheets, and after the sheets, it went to the bales. And I don't know what's coming next, you know. But the bales seem to be working pretty good for what I've seen in production. Well, I think what changed the dress code is probably one of the main things. Was we were so proud to be in the tobacco business, and it got run down and run down and run down, and how harmful it was to you. And so we just gradually eased down what we thought. You know, our pride in tobacco, Reynolds used to advertise pride in tobacco, and everybody had pride in tobacco. That was the thing to do. But after the government and everybody went against tobacco, the pride wasn't there anymore, you know. People in the Burley, I still wore a tie up until they did away with it. But the buyers in the warehousemen, maybe a few of the warehousemen, but they just quit doing it because it was not comfortable for one thing. You're up there and working and pulling tobacco, and you got some of your best clothes on. I mean, it looked a little silly anyway to me, but that's the way it was. That's the way it started out. It was, and if you go back in the 30s, and if you can find some, and you may have some information or a tape or a video on the back of tobacco in those days, man, it was really a pride thing then. And it was, but it just gradually, when the tobacco industry started, when the tobacco companies kind of went against the graders and the warehousemen and the farmers because of the tobacco that they were receiving. And when this started, everything changed, you know. And it wasn't the tobacco farmer, it wasn't the warehouseman, it wasn't the graders or the auctioneers. It was a company man itself was causing the tobacco to get the tobacco that they was getting, because they was changing grades and doing things that shouldn't be done. And it eventually did away with it. But through all this together, the pride in tobacco changed. And you know, it's got to the point, well, why are we dressing up for it? Why we need to wear a tie? Because people don't appreciate it like they used to. And you can see the crowds, you can see the people just kind of dwindling away that used to come. I remember opening day, there might be 200 or 300 people at the warehouse on opening day, you know. And that just gradually went out too. So I think all this put together, and not only is any one reason that causes it, but over a period of time, just everything developed like it did. But the tobacco's still going strong, you know. But our way of doing it has changed. Well, I can speak for the Burley, and it's basically the same way down here. The farmer, he wanted to sell his best tobacco first, you know, and that's strange too, because one year they want one kind of tobacco, and next year they want another. They might want the tips one year, next year they might want the lugs or the trash or the thin tobacco. You set it out. My dad was very curious, and he didn't want nobody leaning on his pile of tobacco, and a lot of folks down there the same way. And I'm speaking of Burley because I was raised up in that. But he'd get the tobacco in the warehouse on a basket, and all the hands had to be a certain way, and the middle of the baskets, when he lined them up, the tails of that tobacco, you can look right down, all them baskets, might be 15 or 20 of them, the tails would be lined up right together, and all the baskets gonna be basically the same size, you know, and it looked good. You know, when you walk in the warehouse and you spot a real neat set tobacco, the buyers would walk right to it, check it out. The color and the texture always had to be there too, but that displaying it real neat caught their eye, and it paid off. And my dad's son being an auctioneer didn't hurt anything. Oh, yeah. Well, in Kentucky, they would, you'd bring a load of tobacco in there, depending on how big a load you had, a couple hours, 3 or 4 hours, you might work 4 hours in the morning and a couple hours afternoon, you have it all lined up on a basket, because they had to take it off the stick, put it on a basket, pack it down, move it over in the line and get it done. But there might be 20, 30 men working on one load. I mean, there was a bunch of them out there working, and it might be 100 at the whole warehouse, because they hired men in the wintertime. There was farmers that would go to the warehouse and work when they couldn't do anything else. So they had plenty of help, and it's all done by hand. And it didn't take them long to get done what they wanted to do. You had a grader when they take the tobacco off the truck, whatever was on the trailer, they grade it out. Each grade, if you got 4 or 5 grades on that truck, he put the trash on the bottom, the lugs, the tips, he'd have it all separated on that truck. So when he took it off, they would grade each grade at a time. And then set it over, throw another grade out. There'd be a man called a grader. He would look at this stick and that stick, and he'd throw that one over there, and look at this and throw this one over here. Each stick would go in a different pile, until the assembly piles, until they got the truck unloaded. And then they'd start putting it on the basket according to the worst on the bottom and the best on top. And that's the way that pile goes. All right, start putting some of that on here. You know, he would direct, all right, put me 3 rounds of that, 4 rounds of this, until the basket got as high as they wanted. And the first 2 or 3 rounds would be some of the best, that were not hardly as good, the worst, and that's the way it went down that basket. And that's what they did. Of course, you don't put your worst on top anyway, anything, do you? Yeah, that was done more down here than it was in Kentucky, because it's cold up there, and they didn't want to fight that cold weather. And they got mighty cold up there in them warehouses, and especially around Carrollton on the river, and that wind blowing off that river, and it's snow and ice, the temps would be about 10 or 12 degrees, and it felt like it was 10 below. You know, we have coats and wrapped up, long johns and everything. I can't remember many peddlers in my day, but I know they did do it. There'd be folks out there selling wrenches or tools or clothes. Clothes has always been peddled, you know. Yeah, they did that also. Yeah, you could, there'd be some young children. I guess the first time I went with my dad, I was less than 10. I was probably 6 or 7 years old. And I remember a guy by the name of H.T. Harrington, big, tall fellow, had a mustache and talked like this. Lennon, how are you doing today? What do you say there, young man? And he reached in his pocket and gave me a nickel. Man, that was the greatest thing I thought, because that auctioneer talked to me, you know. So, yeah, the children went in, and sometimes they'd set their baby on the basket. This is my crop, man. This baby's mom and daddy standing over there. This is my children, you know. And they would do that, try to influence them a little bit. So, oh yeah, all kind of tricks work. Tobacco business has been my life. You know, when I was 24 years old, I started auctioneering. And I traveled, enjoyed traveling. I know I came from a little community called Cropper, Kentucky, Cropper. It's 10 miles out of Shelbyville. 250 people in the crossroad. Had a store and a bank and a couple of churches. And I started traveling on the microphone. Well, there's some boys that I went to school with right at Cropper. We had a little elementary school that never left town. They still in Cropper. And I thought what I missed by not staying and growing up with the community. But I also thought what they missed by not traveling. You know, And I love to go and see something. My mother loved, she loved to go and see and travel. And I guess that's where I got it from. But the opportunity to go to Africa and Czechoslovakia in Africa, that was the highlight of my tobacco career. To be able to go over there and see how the other world lives. And I always wanted to go to Africa. And I got an opportunity to go and got paid for it.